Okay, it actually worked. Okay, I'm gonna set up my older, shittier laptop for my chat thing. So you folks can comment. Anybody actually shows up while I'm talking. And then I'll send out alert. And try to get started. I meant to get started earlier, but I got distracted, which happens most of the time. Oh, dang it, I did it again. JS 104.3, chapter 1, education. Okay. Alright. Open. Piece of shit. Where? Alright. Good. Alright. And then, can I actually get into, got a lot of stuff up. Can I get into Francis Marion, or do I need to do this manually again? Who's messaging me? Where's my phone? Where's anything? Oh, there it is. Oh, SoundCloud. Thanks, SoundCloud. That's completely important. Nursing Center. Or login. Hey, it's not broken. Cool. Alright. Hey, we've actually got 9 people in here. Well, yeah, 9. 8. I think one of them might be me. Let me remember how to do this. Shut up! Everything's fine, you stupid laptop. Channel. So why don't use this laptop to try and stream, because it's slow as shit. Sorry. Told you that I the language, I can't help it. Faculty, I think. Yeah, here we go. Alright, email. Email everybody. Outlook. Wait, no. Why did it change like that? Oh, okay. Okay. Why can I? What? Oh. Yes. Like. All right. Sign it. Okay. Now, how many students are actually in this class? Does it say out of 24? So 10 out of 24. So there's 14 students in this class, and there's currently. Oh, okay. So most of you are here. That's good. That's great. Excellent. Again, I hope most of the people actually in this video are you folks. I don't actually have a way to check that right now. I don't know if there is a way I can check that, but whatever. Okay. Whatever. Let's see. Slideshow. I have to change this because I'm online now. Okay. Now, when I set this up originally, this was back when I was teaching for the very first time, and I did my intro, and notes on the first day. So some of this is going to be stuff we already did, so I'll skim through it real quick. But yeah, so for those of you that weren't here on Tuesday, hello, I'm Riley Holt, Professor Holt, whatever you want to call me. I don't care, not Dr. Holt, because I don't have that certification. Excuse me. The email there is the best way to contact me. You should be getting my email through the Francis Marion website or Francis Marion email, because that's how they want me to contact you, and that's how I've been doing my best to let you guys know. And again, if you're here and you're hearing me, you should be getting my emails. So you should already. This should all be good. Normally this is what I cover in class, and people are like, I don't know what the email is. Like I said it like 5 times. So again, it's a little bit weird online. So yeah, this is Western Civ. We're going to be going from roughly the beginning until after the Protestant Reformation. The ending time's a little bit weird. We're doing the Protestant Reformation and like the Renaissance and Age of Exploration, and then it just kind of ends. Just because for the next class we need to begin before the French Revolution, because if we end or if we start like at the French Revolution, it just hush cat. It just it's not good. Anyway, if you have any questions at any time, please make it known in the little comment chat thing we have here on YouTube's live chat, what you call it. I was gonna just do it through Twitch originally. It's like, no, that's not as good because there's that whole delay. I mean, this still has a slight delay, but hopefully it won't be as noticeable. Is it live? It's not live. Okay. Switch it to live. There we go. Okay. So yeah, with that said, I'll begin. Again, if you have any questions or comments or whatever, just post it, and I will get to it as soon as I see it. I might get in the weeds a little bit here, but as soon as I see it, because I've got my second laptop, my old laptop that's going to sit here and never heat if I'm not careful, over here to the side as sort of my observation window. So that's what's going on over there. All right. So I talked about all this. Attendance, try to show up. The original thing was like, oh, if you miss, you need to not do that. It's my idiot cat. If you miss 4 days in a row, which is 2 weeks straight, I'm supposed to drop you. We'll deal with that when we get to it. Get off the counter. Why do my cats have to do this while I'm trying to teach? Grading policy, test structure. Yeah, I'm gonna do like 3 tests, the final, and 2 papers, and I'll drop the lowest one, not including the final. Get out of the sink, you idiot! Sorry. Like, I can see the cat from here. Jesus. Okay. Test. If we're able to meet in person, it'll be multiple choice and short answer. If we're still online when the tests start happening, I'm going to have to modify them to be like short essay questions. So we'll get there when we get there. And then the writing assignments will be, excuse me, apologize, I just ate. Pretty standard fare, 2 to 3 pages. We'll talk about those in greater detail when we get there. The first one will be due like middle of the semester. The last one will be due at the end of the semester. So yeah, plenty of time. And I mentioned this in the second class because I was more awake. There will be like a default option as far as the topic for each of the papers. But also you're welcome to kind of do whatever as long as it's within the time period. Because honestly, like for the first one, for example, which I chose way back years ago when I first started teaching, it's like Athens versus Sparta. Tell me the good and bad of each city-state and which one you personally prefer, and defend your side of the argument. And there's not really a wrong answer to that because a lot of people are like, oh well, Athens has democracy. And then other people are like, yeah, well, Sparta has, more freedom for its actual people, besides the slaves. But also, you can't say, well, Athens didn't have slaves. Like, yeah, Athens had slaves. Everybody had slaves. So you can't use that as a justification. But point is, you would pull from that and make that argument. But the thing is, when I get, well, it wouldn't be as bad this semester because this isn't a huge class, and it's just one class of this. But when I would get like 60 students all submitting the same paper, it got a little tiresome. So if there's something else you want to write about, you'd probably be more interested in that. And there's the cat on the damn counter. Oh no, that's Toru. Toru, off the counter. Girl. And if you're enjoying the subject, you're probably going to enjoy writing it more, so it's going to be easier for you to write. And if you're enjoying writing it, I'm going to be able to tell, and I'm probably going to enjoy reading it. And it's going to be better for everybody. That said, if you find the dichotomy between Athens and Sparta interesting, do that. I'm not trying to, ward you off of that or anything. But, just FYI. Okay. So we did this, history, yada, yada, yada. Dates and places, people, events, etc., etc. And as I said, my read on it is just the who, what, where, when, and why. In particular, the why, or why/how. So Hannibal, yeah, we're gonna talk about Hannibal during the Second Punic War. In Italy, the win isn't super important. Please stop sending me stuff. Yes, why? Well, there's a lot behind the Punic Wars. Well, Second Punic War especially. Even the name. Whew, really early in the morning for orange juice. And we'll get to that when we get to Hannibal. One of my favorite characters in history, Hannibal. Okay. Now, to see who's awake and paying attention, I want you folks to answer a question for me. Now, again, this is much easier when I'm actually sitting in front of a classroom. I can stare at you until someone actually answers. Which of these is not a historical structure? So we've got Stonehenge. Man, I should have gotten a better picture of Stonehenge by now. The Colosseum and the Continuum, which I think this was a it wasn't quite done yet. You can see the flower beds are garbage. If you've not actually seen the Continuum yet, because we're online, that's part of the Continuum building. It's quite pretty. It's a very nice building. But anyway, which of these, answering in the chat, is not a historical building, not a historical structure? Let me turn this down a little bit because I can hear myself. I don't like that. Continue on. Good answer, but actually no. I get why you answered that, and that's the reason why I put that in there. Exactly. Well, think of the word history and why we have the word prehistoric. But thank you for answering, even if it was my obvious bait answer. Thank you for starting the conversation. The Stonehenge, yes, and the reason why Stonehenge is not a historical structure, and I said building, and I shouldn't have said building. I meant, I have structure here. That's the more correct term, because this Stonehenge was still built by people. It was still used by people, but it was built in a time before written record. History, as a definition, is the study of written record. Therefore, Stonehenge is a prehistoric structure. The Continuum, despite it being, like a year old at this point, is very historic because there's crap written about it, all over the place. The Colosseum is very historic. It was built during, the Roman Empire. There's crap written about it all over the place. Now, not that nobody's written about Stonehenge, but nobody's writing about Stonehenge when it was being built. There's no contemporary writing about Stonehenge. So that's what I mean by historical structure. So that's the difference between historic and prehistoric. That's why you can say, like, that's why you can say, oh, well, there's tribes of people in the Amazon that are still prehistoric. Well, how does that make sense? Because they don't have written writing. They don't written language. If they're not writing down records. They're not writing down their language. They're technically prehistoric. And that's kind of fascinating. Now, I talked about the historical lens on Tuesday. This idea of historical event based on present day events, Roman Republic versus the Roman Empire. That was actually something. This was one of the first classes I took in grad school. It was called Classical America. Um, all of our founding fathers were massive nerds when it came to like Roman history and Greek history, and they all had pen names of like Roman orators and stuff. They were complete dorks. It was great. I mean, that's why so many of our buildings, especially here in the South, but like all these old uh, government buildings look like Greek temples and crap. Like, it's because our founding fathers were nerds. And then Athens and Sparta, in the context of the Cold War, this idea of, oh, well, even though Athens lost, we'll talk about that. This idea of, oh, well, Athens was eventually triumphant because of democracy, and therefore we're going to be okay in the Cold War. And then the idea of civil rights in, say, the Dark Ages was not really a thing anybody thought about, not really, compared to today where that's more of a thing. And then you look back and say, okay, well, how were people treated that weren't, the nobility or, the monarchy? Because, again, that's the historical lens. That's the idea of looking back and seeing things based on today. So, that should be it for the review. Yeah. So that's everything up to today, and then that little bit about history versus prehistory. So, getting started on the actual notes. If you don't have the book yet, that's fine. I understand. Please don't be loud, Otto. Let's see. Now, this is what my book looks like. Mini Europe's. Is my video frozen? No, it's just being done. Okay, yeah. So, Mini Europe's, Choice and Chance, yada yada yada. It's got all these pictures on it. I don't know if yours might look different. This one's slightly newer. It's not like my American Histories book where it's very, very old because I'm a dork and I wanted my stuff to look the same. Let me see. The first chapter is simply called Preliminary to Western Civilization because there it is. So, civilization is, according to the book, let me see. Well, if you're going to be reading through the chapters, which I highly suggest, you're going to want to skim. But also B, you're going to want to skip the very first part because like it opens with this narrative about like the first European and where he was. Like, okay, that's all well and good, but it's not necessary what we're doing. But they do have like headings and subheadings and stuff in bold and things that are more important to our notes than some narrative opening. So for civilization to occur, you need settled life and a critical mass of people. So you need more than just nomadic people following herd animals around. They need to be settled in a single place and enough people to sustain themselves. Agriculture, which is something I'll get to in a moment. So they're growing their own food. They're not hunter gatherers, as well as trade. So they're making enough food, or they're perhaps producing something else and trading it with other settlements around the area for something maybe that they didn't have to begin with. So that's very important for the idea of civilization. Government and law, that's pretty self-explanatory. Something to govern themselves, some idea to keep them from, falling into anarchy. Uh, and then writing an abstract thought. So again, this idea of having written record, and then the abstract thought is that comes off of writing, because a lot of societies that had oral tradition, you can still have history to a degree, oral history. But in order to remember the past, you had to just like memorize these long passages. But once you had things written down, you could essentially sit and study them and think more abstract. This is where you had things like the early mathematics and whatnot. So this really began to advance civilization. I don't know why my doofy cat is being an idiot right now. Okay, so prehistory. Uh, as I said, prehistory is before writing. Writing is necessary to have your history. This is the realm of the archaeologist or the anthropologist, which might even be my next. Yeah. See, I get ahead of myself. In my notes, it's like I knew I had something about this, but maybe I didn't write it down. So you have your pottery, your painting, tools, bones, weapons. When you find these settlements, you find the remains of the people and their things, but there's no, on this day this happened, but you do get an idea of how these people lived. Page 7 mentions it should be page 7 for you guys. It might not be. But basically it talks about we've got new dating techniques that are different than the various ages that history was used to be defined into, like, oh, the Bronze Age and the Stone Age and the Mesolithic Age. It's like, yeah, but the way that was defined was not so much based on a span of years, but what tools the society was using. And the thing about that was a society, a group of people, might start using, say, well, to use an example we're going to get to, perhaps not today, but soon, the Hittites used iron before anybody else. So they were in the Iron Age while everyone else was still in the Bronze Age. So it's not like the Hittites started using iron and suddenly the Iron Age was there. That's not how it worked. The Hittites themselves were in the Bronze Age, or in the Iron Age. Everyone else was still in the Bronze Age. And then over the course of, I want to say, a couple of 100 years, maybe, in the the span of fighting and conquering and all of this, uh, the secret of being able to mine and forge iron spread, and these other societies moved into the Iron Age. So yeah, it's a weird way of doing things. Yeah, which is what I just said. Like I said, I get ahead of myself. I've got a system, or uh, um, there's an option here for my PowerPoint that I can have it so that it's got the next like point that comes up, so I can see it, but you guys wouldn't see it if we were doing this on the projector. Um, but as far as this, I don't think that's going to be possible. Okay. So, some of the earliest stuff we have between 35,000 and 15,000 years ago, bone flutes, fertility figures. I think I've got a picture of some of the weird little fertility figurines. Um, some of the earliest cave paintings were in Chauveau and Lascaux, France. Lascaux, France. I don't know. French is weird. Um, yeah, this is the one that's in Chauveau. It's literally like the opening of the chapter. So it's the woolly rhinoceros and some warthogs and whatnot, horses and etc. So yeah, I usually follow along with the book. Let me make sure I'm not getting ahead of myself. Okay. So do I have? Yeah. Okay. Now the thing about the cave paintings, early on, and this is true, you can especially see with these early cave paintings, they focused heavily on the animals, the big woolly rhinoceros and the mammoths and all this, um, because that was the the focus for the people. I mean, that was what they were hunting, and also these things were huge. Um, but then later on, as humans began figuring things out and settling down and becoming more stable, the cave paintings that continued, the people became more centralized and often much larger than the animals to show this, like, I guess, importance of the people in the society. Now they didn't feel like they were this small insignificant part of everything anymore. They were now this grander thing. So it's quite interesting to see how all that went. And then symbols as well, representing the sun and water and whatnot. So, interestingly enough, it was not agriculture that led to humans settling down, but the domestication of animals. Largely, the herd animals that humans were often following, I guess they realized, hey, if we can, you know, keep these things in one place, we don't have to follow them all the time. If we can raise them and, have them grow in number, and then just kill a few at a time, we can just have like an ever increasing source of food. This is perfect. But if we're keeping them in one place, we need to, pin that in and keep them safe from predators. But now we need somewhere for us to live. Oh no, we accidentally a village. But if you're accidentally a village, you can't just sit there and wait for your cows or whatever to mature. You need to figure something else out in the meantime, and gathering berries and roots and stuff might not necessarily be enough. So eventually they figured out agriculture, and then we had a full blown settlement. Especially once they figured out wheat. Wheat is, for the most part, I can't say worldwide, because in the Far East it was rice, but for Western countries, wheat was the turning point for civilization in that it allowed relatively easy growth and high calorie yield, because it was easy to grow. There was almost nothing to making bread, and bread yields a lot of calories. There you go. Compared to, wandering around all the time and hunting and gathering roots and berries and whatnot, which burns a lot of calories, and then you're not getting much back on top of it. Yeah, so there's another cave painting here. Also, I think my mouse shows up on the screen. They often painted on top of. It will not stay live for some reason. They often painted on top of old ones. So here in the back you see deer, and then on the top you've got these big cattle, perhaps bison, as well as these very large horses. There's fertility figurines. If you ever seen Hellboy, I think that's the first one. Or it might be Hellboy 2. They've got this massive one in one of the scenes. Alright, so the Mesolithic Age. So the Ice Age is ending. The glaciers are receding, which also means the massive megafauna rather, the mammoths and just had a brain fart there. The mammoths and rhinos and whatnot are also leaving where the people are. So they're smaller game. So you just got the fish and plants to really deal with. You still got rabbits and probably more regular sized deer, but you don't have, a truck sized mammoth anymore. And this is, as I mentioned, when art was depicting people prominently, they weren't so, living on the edge of the knife, as it were. You also had your megalithic structures. We had Stonehenge and these other, quote, hinges. Hold on for just a second. Make sure that I've got. Okay. You got Skara Brae. in the Orkney Islands, which was a village actually up in Scotland that was discovered, I want to say in the late 1800s. I don't remember, which is bad because I literally show this every year. No, I'm terrible. Anyway, it's this, Stone Age village that was abandoned at some point thousands of years ago and relatively recently discovered, and it's still there. They've preserved it, and you can go and see it. It's up in northern Scotland. It's super cool. Ring of Brodgar is another hinge, as it were. It's a big ring of stones. Um, not as visually imposing as Stonehenge, because Stonehenge is just these big, broad stones. Ring of Brodgar, the ring itself is larger than Stonehenge, but the stones themselves are much thinner, but broader. So from a, when you look at the thing from a distance, it's like, oh yeah, this thing's huge. But then, up close, it's quite different. And I've actually got videos. So there's Stonehenge. There's it's that same picture. It seems to be slightly higher quality. Scarborough. Let me see if I can actually pull this up and make it so we can watch it. I've never done this online. Let's see what happens. Alright, so I'm going to pause this. I'm going to try and play a YouTube video through YouTube. Am I going to get a copyright strike? This is going to be fun. Okay. Let me change the window capture real quick. Properties. There it is. Okay, let's see if this works. It's like 3 minutes long, so just hang in there. Hold on. I'm going to turn the gain up a little bit so you guys can hopefully hear it. Okay. I usually have it turned down because I stream games sometimes, and sometimes the game is like so much louder than I am. Okay. Let's see if this works.
Buried in the sand on the shoreline of the Bay of Scale in Sandwich, on the west coast of the Orkney mainland, is one of Orkney's best known archaeological sites, Skara Brae. This 4,500-year-old stone-built village is thought to have some of the best preserved Stone Age houses in Western Europe. In the winter of 1850, a great storm battered Orkney and stripped the grass from a local mound known as Skara Brae. This revealed a series of stone buildings. During the next 16 years, local laird William Watt of Scale excavated 4 of the houses. Then they were left until another storm in 1925 damaged some of them. When construction work on a seawall was started, it uncovered even more buildings. Even more excavations began in 1927, and a further 7 houses were uncovered. The sea is constantly eroding the coastline, and Skara Brae was originally much further from the water than it is at this time. A concrete seawall protects it now. The village dates back some 3,000 years BC and was inhabited for at least 600 years. During this time, experts believe that the population never grew beyond 100 villagers at any one time. Although we look down into the houses today, originally they would have been at ground level, but built into a midden of scraps and shells. This acted as stability for the structure and also as a form of insulation. Each house was linked by a series of short, roofed tunnels. The interior
I just realized it wasn't actually playing. Hold on.
The interior of the houses consists of box beds arranged round the walls with a central hearth for heat and cooking. Beds would have had straw or heather mattresses and blankets of animal skins. A storage dresser can also be seen on the back wall opposite the door.
Oh well.
The roofs were probably thatch or animal skins and possibly used whalebone for support. The people who
I wasn't paying attention to the to what you guys were saying. I didn't realize it wasn't changing at all. Well, crap. I will. Well, I'll put the PowerPoint up later. Once we finish the video, or once we finish the PowerPoint, and you guys can follow the link if you want. So it'll be fine. Pull that up. That's what I get. Well, then I can't show. Oh man, because I've got one for my other class as well, and there's no way I can show that one. It's something else entirely. Okay. How much time do we have? A little bit longer. Also, my black cat decided to join me. Yeah. He likes sitting in my lap. I'm glad the fat one doesn't sit in my lap. Cut off circulation in my legs. So, let's move on from broad, just like European prehistory in general to some specific civilizations. So, let's make sure, turn my mic back on. Hey, we didn't drop any frames because I've got like no frames at all. Mesopotamia. So, situated between the Tigris and Euphrates. This is going to be a very common theme we're going to see pretty much through the entirety of this semester, at least until after Rome. Is most of the, well, no, London and Paris are both situated on rivers. So, yeah, all these major cities are geographically driven. I mean, they're situated near, between, by rivers because, you know, waterways are important. Yada, yada, yada. All right. Now, the difference here is, as we'll see with the Nile later, this wasn't just, you know, like with, say, the Savannah River between South Carolina and Georgia, where it's, oh, this is good for shipping. With the Tigris and Euphrates, these rivers would flood often, and when the rivers would flood and then recede, they would leave a lot of silt. I was going to say, what was the word I was trying to look for? This very rich soil in the fields, and then the farming communities, if they would irrigate it properly, they could use this to their advantage and also not lose the fields entirely. And it made for a very rich farming community if they did it right. But one farmer alone couldn't do it. You had to work together. Now, Mesopotamia wasn't a single city, but instead numerous cities, because Mesopotamia is this whole huge region. Sumer is one of the major cities in this area. Um, Now, as far as writing, they used numbers first. They had these marked clay tokens, basically receipts. They were used for economic transactions. So the first known writing were sales receipts. Humanity, right? Now, the actual writing was originally pictographs, then gradually evolved to represent sounds. Sell down, cat. They've got examples of that on page 14 for me. Might be a little bit different for you guys. And their form of writing was called cuneiform. Move my voice cracked there. Which comes from the term cunis or wedge, which was named for the wedge-shaped stylus that was used to actually carve or make the writing. This was developed after 3000 BC and dominated Mesopotamia for about 2,000 years. So it stuck around. We're not obviously not using. They're not using it today, but it. Pardon. It was relevant and very, very early. Now, as we're going to see with Egypt, writing became a specialized tool. It was used by scribes and priests, so it was seen as being above the common man. So it's not like, hey, we have writing now; everyone can read and write. That wasn't how it was used. It's like, hey, we have this idea of marking down ideas in symbols. Is going to be used by the high class. Page 15, again, I'm not 100% sure what the page will be for you guys. And now I can't sit up because there's a cat in my lap. But it's a whole page thing on cracking cuneiform, and it's about this like British explorer who was able to translate cuneiform. And since we have this writing now, they're able to record history and events more concretely than oral traditions because, excuse me, sorry, I assume this isn't something that's fallen by the wayside in the years since I've been out of school. But we're all familiar with the game of telephone, where one person says something and you repeat it all throughout a line, and then by the end of it, it's something else entirely. Well, imagine that, but over thousands of years. I mean, that's where you get your myths and legends and stuff, because it's repeated orally, and it changes with every telling, and before you know it, this dude saw a snake that was especially large in the lake. The next thing you know, we've got a sea monster. And also, people could think more critically because they had the info on hand. You could actually look at it and compare it to other things. And what's also good for us historians is we now have primary documents. Now, what that is for historians is that's primary documents. And if you don't do anything else in history, you don't really have to worry about it. But that's super important because that's something that's written during that time period. So if, say, you were doing, I don't know, let's say you were doing a paper on, I'm just going to use Napoleon. We're not getting to Napoleon in this class, but that's just the first thing that came to mind. So let's say you're doing a paper on Napoleon, and you find, this is actually something that I've used, you find a journal, a diary by one of Napoleon's soldiers. So this is a dude who was there during Napoleon's early campaigns and saw what was going on and wrote about it while he was there. That is a primary source document because he was physically there at the time of what was going on. That is super cool because it's not somebody, 50 years later writing about it based on stuff that he's heard. Because I can write, I personally could write a book on Napoleon. I don't know that much. But if I wrote a book on Napoleon and you guys used it for your source material, sure. But that's still not as good as someone who was there. That's why this stuff's so neat and so important because we now have people who are actually there. And that's why writing is so important. Not saying you guys need to write papers, but why people doing writing, people actually inventing written language is super important. And that's why it makes me sad, like here in America, the Native Americans, for the most part, didn't have written language. So we don't have much written history to pull from. We've got lots of oral tradition, that's great, but that's not, it's not the same as, the written record of, well, in 1503 this happened, or in, 1057 this war happened. That sort of thing. Not that they would use the same year schedule. Why is he so stupid, Tori? Anyway, I'm getting off in the weeds. So, this is a cuneiform tablet. It's like one of the first ones when I was using Google search. It's very, like, you can almost feel it. You can see the deep marks from the Cunis. And I'd hate to be whoever had to drill that hole at the top, because I guess they just sort of, that's how they had it mounted the first time. Okay, so let's do some more stuff in Mesopotamia. So you had your priests, which was kind of the same level as the king. So the kings, nobles, and priests had the power. Now, I'm using the word king here, but it's not like we think of kings in, say, Europe, where they rule over a lot of stuff. The kings here were usually in control of, like, a city. So, because I'm going to get into that in just a minute. Your soldiers, artisans, and farmers had were the people who actually did stuff, and then you of course had slaves on the bottom because as long as people have existed, we've had slavery. Now these lords or governors go away. Known as the Lugal, were the closest to an actual king. They were the ones who were the heads of the larger cities and would often, if not conquer other nearby cities, they would at least project their power to such an extent that other cities around them would pay tribute and ally with them out of fear of being conquered. And there was also much warfare, as I mentioned, conquering and power projection and all of that. Then we had the Akkadian Empire under Sargon the Great, not the racist on YouTube. That was the biggest power in Mesopotamia. Yeah, so see we have here, you've got Akkad, Elam, and the Hurrian kingdoms. Got nomads to the south. Now Egypt did exist at this time. We'll talk about Egypt next time. But there was a lot of warfare going on. But as you can see, this guy was spread way around here. Alright, so let's talk a little bit more about Mesopotamia. Now, Ur-Nammu had a ziggurat of Ur built. This was the first law code we had in history. I don't need to be getting messages right now. Okay. Sorry, my Rouge friend is sending me stuff. So this was the first law code that we've got in history, where if you did a crime, you typically had some payment in recompense. However, in Babylon, we had King Hammurabi, and this Code of Hammurabi were a series of court proceedings, and they were more brutal. You know, if you stole something, well, hold on, let me actually pull this up. Capital punishment was prescribed for a host of offenses, including adultery, robbery, incest, and kidnapping. Yeah, if a matter could not be resolved by the evidence provided by witnesses, the accused was subject to a trial by ordeal or divine judgment. Accused was tossed into the river. Guilty sank. The innocent were able to swim to shore. The code drew sharp legal distinctions between nobles, commoners, or dependents, and slaves, valuing the word and worth of nobles over the two lower orders. Yeah, so what? So the law code of Ur-Nammu rather, you know, was, hey, you done a bad thing, pay a fine. Code of Hammurabi was, hey, we're probably going to kill you. You know, as you do. Excuse me. Mesopotamia, well, not Mesopotamia. Yeah, Mesopotamia. Also, polytheistic. Being agricultural, you depend on the weather, the winds and the rains. Wow, the the rain and the sun and all of that, because you've got to grow your crops. And I mean, even to this day, we can't control the weather. Uh, so back then, it's like, well, I mean, I guess we gotta trust in whatever higher powers we've got. So therefore, the priests who were supposed to intercede with the gods were made far more important, um, and actually made a lot of priests more powerful than the kings. So the kings started taking on priestly functions to try and get some of that power back. This is actually something we're going to see later on in history as well. So there's Ziggurat of Ur. Well, it's a ziggurat. I believe this was rebuilt. Okay. Yeah, we've only got like a few minutes left. So, we'll get into Egypt next time. Any questions before we go? Now, I kind of was hurrying there at the end. I didn't remember quite how much Mesopotamia we had left. So I didn't want to run out of time and still have, notes left to get through. Yeah, sorry the video didn't work, which is going to be a shame for my next class, but kind of goofy video I want to show them. But yeah, so next time we'll jump into Egypt and then whatever else we've got left. There's a lot on Egypt. All right. Oh, what do we got? Yeah, no assignments. Cat, sit still. No assignments. I don't really do that. Just just the tests and the papers and the final. I'll make sure you guys are well prepared before we get to the test. I'll have a study guide up. Well, before we get there, I'll make sure the notes are up and clear and everything. So nothing will surprise. I'll make sure nothing will surprise you. And I'm quite generous on the paper as well. As long as you don't word vomit at me, you should be okay. Yeah, no assignments to worry about, because I know you've got other classes besides this one to do, and giving you guys a bunch of crap to take home is that's I don't feel like that's fair. But good question, thank you. Anything else? I mean, there's three tests. Yeah, three tests and two papers in the final. So there's a few grades. And I'll drop the lowest one, not including the final. So there's plenty of leeway. And the tests have extra credit on them, so lots of cushiony room. My stomach hurts. But yeah, if there's nothing else, we'll call it a day. Okay. Well, thanks for participating, folks. I know this is an early class, and I totally understand. But I do appreciate you guys pitching in a little bit today. But yeah, see you guys on Tuesday. Same time, same place. I'll try and send out the room URL again. But I noticed most of you got here before I sent the URL out anyway, so thanks for that. I appreciate it. All right. I'll get this thing closed down and see you guys later. Where's my thing at? There we go. Yeah, take care. Have a good weekend. Bye.